Meet the big icicle, Torpedo Jones. 2 laps ahead in the top race of the year, and he runs out of gas. He could lose this race. But is he excited? Now he's in a hurry, but he isn't taking unnecessary chances. He wants to win a couple of more championships, then retire and run a little chicken farm. Pretty risky business, chicken farming. Fella can lose his shirt. There's the checkered flag. Torpedo does it again. That makes it 3 in a row. And it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. You have to know Torpedo to know there's something more behind that grin than the thrill of another championship. It so happens that every time Torpedo wins a race, he saves a bunch of lives. That statement can be explained as follows. Off the speedway, Torpedo spends most of his time trying to persuade amateur drivers to drive like professionals. He believes amateur drivers make the highways a lot more dangerous than the speedways. If Torpedo's scared easy, some of the amateur driving he sees would curl his hair. He says some amateurs don't like to read signs and won't even learn from other amateurs' mistakes. Torpedo feels sad enough when he sees grown-up amateurs, but he gets downright melancholy when he sees young drivers going haywire. That's why he travels around the country talking to people just starting out behind the wheel. He knows that if they learn to drive like pros, the highways will someday be safe for everybody. Torpedo wears the big smile when he wins a race because he knows a champ is always welcome wherever he goes.
Well, I promised you earlier this semester that you'd have an opportunity to hear a guest speaker. And today's the day. But before introducing him, let me review briefly what we've covered so far. We began with a study of the importance of highway transportation in the United States, how the increasing use of trucks has helped the growth of commerce, and how the automobile has made it possible for all of us to go beyond the borders of our towns and cities in search of business, pleasure, and recreation. You found out how important it is to drive a car with consideration for the other fellow on the highway, courtesy and good sportsmanship. You found out our emotions, anger, happiness, worry, can make us dangerous drivers if we let those emotions show themselves in the way we handle a car. Are you through shifting gears, Mr. Oldfield? In road practice outside, on the driving area, and on the quiet side streets of town, you learned the simple fundamentals. The instruments in the driver's compartment. You tested the car's controls. And I kept close tabs on you in our dual control training car. You practiced starting and stopping. You learned how to back properly, make turns, and park parallel. And I've tried to get across the fact that driving a car is a two-handed job. However, there's one thing you can't learn in theory, and that's wheel sense. That special knack of handling a car as if you are part of the car and the car is part of you. But I know you're all anxious to meet our guest, a man who has won 3 national championships in automobile racing. He's still in one piece. Mr. Ralph Torpedo Jones. Mr. Jones.
You know, Torpedo would rather lose a wheel going 2 miles a minute than make a speech. But you'd never know it when you hear him talking about wheel sense. What's wheel sense? Well, Torpedo says it's when you're courteous to the other driver and a good sport about his unintentional mistakes. When you can keep tight control of your car and handle it smartly in a jam. When you know stopping distances. When you know and use proper hand signals. And when you can spot the telltale actions that telegraph what pedestrians and other drivers are going to do before they do it. Torpedo is one of those Phi Beta Kappas when it comes to studying drivers. He watches them by the hour, so he can tell people who want to develop wheel sense how to spot people who don't. Watch out for the cutworm, says Torpedo. He wants the piece of road you're occupying, so he'll cut you right off the road in his rush to get somewhere. Where he goes, you wouldn't want to be. But like most amateurs, he'll have an alibi.
When I drive, I keep moving, see? The head of the line, that's for me. I don't like to poke along behind a string of cars, so I cut in front and set the pace. At the head of the line.
Then there's the amateur Torpedo calls the Bush League batter. Throw him a curve and he strikes out. All the way out. After it's over, this kind passes the buck and starts an argument.
I hope you noticed, Max, that I beat you to that curve by a country mile. And I also got here first.
As a matter of fact, Shorty, I got here first. But who cares? If it hadn't been for you passing on a curve, I'd be watching a ball game right now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Torpedo often talks about drivers he calls part-time amateurs. They know how to drive like professionals, but they lose their wheel sense under pressure. Like people who get into their cars on the wrong side because they're in a big hurry. Then they get absent-minded, get mad at the car, the other guy, and themselves. They get so deep in their own stew, they talk to themselves. And then they pass up required reading matter, such as stop signs. All of a sudden, one thing leads to another. Followed by the usual useless postmortem.
Well, I can drive just as well when I'm in a hurry as when I'm not. My husband was waiting for his dinner. I see why people can't realize that other people might be in a hurry and not insist on the right of way all the time. After all, there is such a thing as courtesy.
At this point, Torpedo switches the subject from amateurs who are out of this world to professionals who have to face it. Pros understand speed and control and know how to put them together. For example, here's something that could happen to any driver. In this case, nobody got hurt, but the arithmetic of speed and control is surprising, as Torpedo demonstrates. On a level stretch of dry pavement, the driver is doing 35 miles an hour when he sees the boy on the road up ahead. It takes him 1 second to recognize the danger and get his foot on the brake. With his four-wheel brakes in good condition, his car travels 67 feet before coming to a complete stop. Let's do a retake, says Torpedo. In the reaction time, 1 second, 51 feet of pavement slide under the car. Then, with the brakes on hard, it takes 67 feet to stop cold. 51 plus 67 equals 118. In this case, the boy was 119 feet away. So the driver winds up 1 foot short of breaking a lot of hearts. It's a different story if the roads are wet or icy. On wet roads, the braking distance may be double or more. And on ice, up to 10 times the braking distance for dry pavements. As braking distances are multiplied, human lives are subtracted. When you're in doubt about road surface conditions, slow down and try the brakes. 50 miles an hour is another matter, says Torpedo, because the faster you travel, the faster things happen to you. The answer to this one makes a newspaper headline, plus an obituary. Cold figures tell the story. Although the speed is greater, the reaction time is the same, 1 second. However, in that 1 second, the car going 50 miles an hour travels 73 feet, as compared with 51 feet at 35 miles an hour. Under ideal conditions, good brakes and dry, level pavements, the car will travel 137 feet farther before it can be brought to a stop. 73 feet reaction distance plus 137 feet braking distance equals 210 feet. In this case, exactly 10 feet too many.
Mr. Jones, how about when you're driving 80 miles per hour?
That kind of question is right down Torpedo's alley. Imagine yourself behind the wheel, he says, with a heavy feeling in your right foot. You step it up to 60, 65, 70. You're beginning to move. There isn't much traffic, so you really pour it on. 75, 80, 350 feet ahead, the road clogs up. In 1 second, your foot hits the brake. 117 feet go by. Now it's 200, 300. Look out! Torpedo says the most common answer to the 80-mile-an-hour question is a spray of daisies, the kind you push up. What a guy. He can take the speed out of a speed boy and make him a friend in the bargain. You know, the sports writers say that Torpedo is very fussy about the racing car he drives. Sure, he built it himself. He's fussy about his family car, too. He didn't build it, but he knows exactly why it's a safe automobile. He says it's part of wheel sense to know how to take advantage of the safety that's engineered and built into today's automobile. Torpedo says the average person has his own mental picture of how a passenger car is put together. Kind of rough outline that calls for a chassis appearing from somewhere to meet a nice-looking 5-passenger coupe body that pops down from somewhere else. One body might be blue and another red, or something like that. Most people take it for granted that today's car is something you can bet your life on. But the driver with wheel sense won't take it for granted. He wants to know what's under the surface. A lot of the safety lies under several layers of lipstick, so to speak. It's in the cold steel that's welded together into a reinforced one-piece body. A terrifically important safety feature in today's automobile. This kind of work, says Torpedo, is done by specialists. When these lads put a body together, brother, it stays together. A brand new car always reminds Torpedo of certain engineers he calls the Curiosity Boys. They're the fellows who didn't believe the expert who said, quote,
"The 1912 models represent the farthest possible advance in automobile construction,"
unquote. As Torpedo says, if anybody has driven a 1912 model recently, he knows the Curiosity Boys have added several safety features since then. But these safety-minded Curiosity Boys are never satisfied. They raid the assembly line without warning and grab a pretty stock model to see what makes it tick and why it shouldn't tick better. Let somebody tell them an engine has plenty of zing and a set of brakes has a steel grip, and what do? Run the engine ragged and torture the brakes till the place smells like a fire in a rubber factory. You could never think of all the fussy little tests the Curiosity Boys invent. Unless, like them, you got paid for carrying a chip on your shoulder. They try freezing the car to death in a big ice box set for 20 below. Why? Well, they figure that if they make a popsicle out of a car and it doesn't quit cold on them, it won't conk out on the fellow who drives it through tough winters. Tell the Curiosity Boys the car has a low center of gravity, and they tilt it up to see for themselves. Just for good measure, they try it on the run. If it doesn't spill over, they're as satisfied as people with their particular temperaments can be. Whereupon they try to drown the car. Next, they slam it onto a road that has a complete set of jolts built in. If the preceding torches have produced a weak spot, it'll show up in this shakedown. Believe it or not, the car manufacturer pays these torture experts. They even run a special test on behalf of people who drive on the back roads. Finally, they turn the car into the speedway and pour on the coal. If you're going to do that kind of driving, says Torpedo, here's the place to do it. Test drivers burn up the road for hundreds of miles, checking speed, gas and oil consumption, pickup, drift, and brake action. If the car comes through, the Curiosity Boy in charge checks it out on the score sheet. His job is finished. The rest is up to the Curiosity Boys in service stations all over the country, who will maintain today's cars in safe condition if the owners have enough wheel sense to give them a chance. And while we're standing here talking about today's automobile, says Torpedo, the designers are dreaming about new cars that will have the grace of a hawk and the safety and durability of a bulldozer. They're the Curiosity Boys who never look at the calendar because it's always next Tuesday for them. The next model is their challenge. And right behind them are the fact and figure boys, the engineers who change dreams into down-to-earth blueprints. And back of them are still more Curiosity Boys, forever testing mechanical improvements for tomorrow's automobile. You can look to them for newer and better standards of safety, because they won't be satisfied with today's best. No wonder Torpedo takes a shine to the Curiosity Boys. He knows they're in cahoots with him in the job Torpedo rates 15 laps ahead of anything else. The job of teaching wheel sense to the new generation of drivers. Well, maybe I shouldn't get personal, but it so happens that I'm Torpedo's mechanic, the guy who nurses his racing car. Naturally, I see the boss under all kinds of pressure. He's what I'd call a slow starter and a fast finisher, whether he's on the speedway or the speaker's platform. And when he's through, even a speed boy has a pretty good idea what wheel sense is all about.
Oh, can I give you a lift?
That'd be swell.
Would you like to drive?
You mean it?
Well, sure. Here are the keys.
Gosh, thanks.
I happen to know that he goes around with his head in the clouds if he can do what you just saw him do. Bring an amateur into the ranks of professional drivers. After all, he says, wouldn't you get a lift out of saving a life in advance?
Hey, Mac.
Uh-huh.
How do you spell amateur?
A-M-A-T. Oh, so you've been taking notes. It's about time.
You're right, Mac. It's never too late to learn wheel sense.
Thank you.